All right, let's talk risk assessments. So a risk assessment is purely there to identify a risk. That's the only reason we do it. So if we're sending our guys out to a site, we want to know if there's going to be something that could potentially cause harm. And if so, we need to document it and try and manage it so far as reasonably practicable to try and remove it. Let me show you how we manage our risks and how we issue a risk assessment to our customers. So first up, what we're going to be doing is let's open up Rams app. Now, Rams app is a software package that we use, and you can buy it online at rams-app.co.uk. And I think it works really, really nicely for sort of putting together very easy risk assessments that you can then copy and paste almost and create duplicates of with very minor sort of changes. So we log on to the software, as you can see just here. We're greeted straight away onto the dashboard. So we've got the risk assessments and the method statements that we've previously created. So what we're going to be looking at now is the process of carrying out risk assessments. Now, this is something you're going to need to do for every single project that you undertake. The idea behind this is we're simply looking to identify what the risks are to our staff or perhaps to our customers as well and the general public, and then look to try and manage those and mitigate those risks so far as reasonably practicable. So to do this, we use a piece of software. In this case, we're going to be using Rams app. Now, you can access Rams app as we've looked at previously by going to rams-app.co.uk. There are, of course, plenty of alternatives, but this is the one that I find is really, really nice and straightforward to use. So let's have a quick look at this one here. So we'll create a brand new document. So all you need to do once you're logged in, you go to risk assessments and method statements, scroll to the right-hand side, and you can create a new Rams. The other way you can do it, of course, is to use a template if you've got one pre-saved. So we actually do have one pre-saved. So all I'm going to do is let's create a brand new one from this. So all I'm going to do is click duplicate, and I'm going to call it test for the purposes of this video, and we'll just click on create here. So all we're going to do now is give the document a reference number. So this is going to be called test project 101, and we'll click on continue. Next is going to be asking us about the hazard and the risk assessment section itself. So we'll just wait for this to load. So first up, each of these items may or may not be relevant to your project. So all you need to do is click on that boolean on the side. You can add or remove it from the project. So to see it added in, all you need to do is click on here. That will add it in, and then you can identify the risks that you've got on there as well. So for this one, we haven't got any artificial light. We're going to be using this test project, let's say, for an indoor line marking project. So we will use machinery. There probably won't be any hot works, but we may have a generator. So we could potentially use hot works for the exhaust, but I wouldn't typically use that as hot works. So let's go down, see what we have got. So driving and transportation. So to start with, we are going to be driving a company vehicle. So what we might want to do then is click on assess risk. So to do that, all you do is click on the right-hand side that you can see here. And then this will give us a risk matrix. Now, you don't actually need to give a risk matrix. You just need to identify and mitigate so far as reasonably practicable. That doesn't mean you can remove it entirely, because some risks you simply can't remove. So for this one here, we're saying the hazard is that driving a company vehicle for business purposes, and then the person at risk is the driver, the passenger, and any general public as well. So there's a risk of injury, there's a risk of damage to property, and what we're going to be doing is using some control measures. So for this one, we've said a pre-use vehicle checklist. So we're checking for lights, mirrors, anything that we need, tires, for example, brakes, make sure the vehicle is fully equipped and roadworthy. Now, this is something that you do anyway as a driver, but it's important that as a business operator, we've actually identified that's something that has to be done. We've put in place a plan for it, and then we've reduced that risk accordingly if possible. It may be that you're already doing it and you don't reduce the risk any further, and that's absolutely fine. What's important is that we document it. So once we're happy with the section, we can click on the tick to add or remove these from our risk assessment. Once we're happy, just click on save and exit. Next, what we're going to be doing is, let's imagine we've got pretty much all of the risks identified in this one here. We're going to go through, just check anything else. So we've got driving and transport, public presence, we've got some electrical equipment, so we're going to be using the customer's power supply. Again, you can open up this, you can assess the risks inside here. So we've said that we're going to notify people that we're using their power, that there could be a power surge, there could be a power cut, there could be something else. And it's just a case of making sure that the system we're connecting to in this case is tested and it's up to the current standard. Again, we're going to save and exit, and we're just going to scroll through this nice and quickly toward the end. So lastly, we're just going to scroll down here, see what else we've got. So we've got noise, there's some out of hours work, we're going to use some portable appliances, we're going to stack up some tins of paint, so we've added stacked materials in. A few hazardous substances, so for example in this one we're going to be using paint, we might even use paint in the form of spray. And as you know, I don't like spraying any lines indoors, I prefer to hand roll, but for this one we may be spraying on some walking men, so we'll just put down that we're going to use spray as well. And then lastly, bit of manual handling again for lifting the equipment in and out. It's a pressurized system. When we're spraying the walking man, for example, we're going to build up 1500 to 2000 PSI on the machine. So we do have a pressurized system to take care of as well. And we'll just skip right through this to the hazard side. So we'll just continue. Next, we've got the sequence of works. So this one here is going to be laying out what we're doing in a set order. So for example, we're arriving on site, we're filling out the induction paperwork, we're getting the permits in place. Next, we're going to start work, or we're going to do a site inspection or a pre-inspection, carry out our installation, then we're going to be tidying up, then we're going to sign off the permits and close down any licenses that we've got open as well. So all we're going to do here is write down that sequence of activities. Again, we'll just continue with these ones. Next is our method statement. So this is where we're actually going to document it. So in my one, you can see I would write down the engineers will report to reception and sign in. We'll collect the passes from the customer if we need to get access to any rooms. They'll give us the permits. And really, this is something that I think it works for pretty much every single project. So we would typically duplicate this and change very little on it. The only thing we're going to change is the customer details. We might use a different paint product, for example, but the hazards and risks are very much the same every single time we do a project, with very, very sort of minor changes. So really it's a case of skimming through these. The other thing you might want to do is change the personnel involved. So in this case, I've put John and Lee down, but I could also add more people. If I do, I might want to add in the training and competence for them. So for my ones, I just say that they're trained to the company standards. Now for that, I might have an internal certification process where I just say, I've come out, I've watched you do the job, I sign you off and give you a sort of report card that says what was right, what needed improving, but you hit an overall satisfactory score. Next, we've got the legislation. Now, this part's really important. Now, here in the UK, we've got different rules and regulations, of course, to the rest of Europe as well as the rest of the world. So depending on where you are, you're going to have different legislation that applies to your project. But as a general rule, we've got the Health and Safety at Work Act, we've got the Environmental Protection Act, so our paints are, for example, hazardous, and we need to control how we're disposing of our waste. CDM is a huge one here, which relates to how the construction design management impacts our projects, who's responsible, for example, as a principal contractor and has overall responsibility for health and safety, is absolutely huge here. So these are the things that I recommend you would go through as well. You can see all of ours on here, and I'll provide you a copy of all the legislation that affects work here in the UK that we think is relevant. You are, of course, able to change that, add your own, or remove it as you see necessary. Next, we're going to be adding the access arrangements. So for this one here, we need to know what's happening when we get to site. So, for example, if I'm working in this area right here, do I have to park my car all the way over there, or am I able to bring all the equipment to my working area and contain it all in one space? And if I'm not able to do that, how am I transporting things across? Are you going to open doors? Have you got to go through fire exits? Are they going to be roller shutters, for example? So there's a lot of consideration for this one as well. Next up are the electrical isolations. Say, for example, if we want to connect up to their electrical installation, we need them to isolate. We're going to connect in, they're going to re-energize for us. We don't want to be responsible for that. It could be that you take your own power and this section isn't quite necessary for you, and that's absolutely fine. Next, we've got our waste management process. So for us, we take all of the waste away. It is a hazardous material that we typically apply, so we're responsible for removing that. You may also need to provide a waste transfer note to your customer as well, depending on where you are. Lastly, we've got the emergency procedures, the first aid provisions, and the welfare provisions. So essentially what we're looking at is who's responsible for the health and safety. Is there access to toilets, drinking water, etc., in a sort of clean, dry area. And then we're going to be looking at the manual handling technique. So we add in just a little image that shows on here. Now, all of this is included within RAM's app. So that's why I love the software. We can literally tick what we want to add in, add these items on. So if I wanted to add a welding mask, I can tick it and you can see it's just gone grey here, added it on for me. I can see I've got high vis added and I've got boots added, but we may want to add hearing protection, for example, as well, and perhaps some safety goggles because we're doing some shot blasting as well. So what's nice is you can literally add those on. And then we'll go through to the end, and I'm going to show you the final document. So everything's completed. What we're able to do at this point then is issue this document to our customer as well as the staff as well. It's really important that when you complete a risk assessment and method statement, you don't just give it to your customer and forget about it and wait for them to read through 20 pages and expect them to come back with a question. Your staff also need to read it and understand it, because ultimately they're working to these standards. And if they haven't read it and agreed to it, then how are they ever going to know? So what we'll do, we'll go back to our current template and I'll show you the final one ready to go to the customer. And all we'll do is we can send this from here. So for this one, we can do share content, but I'm going to click on preview so that we're not looking to email this one out to anybody. But as we scroll down, I'll show you what it'll actually look like. So at the top, we've got the author, that's me, the project, revision number. So every time you create a new one, you'll add a new revision onto this one. And then this just gives you the contents of what to look for within the document. So as you're going through, you can see all of the risks we've assessed, what we're going to be doing, where we're working, the people involved, the competencies of them as well, the regulations and legislations that are applicable to us, and then we're going to give you a risk matrix a little bit further down here. So as we scroll down, it's going to say first aid, welfare, how to lift, what PPE we'll use, and then the risk matrix, which will come up just here. So on these ones, we've got low, medium, and high risk. Again, you don't actually need a risk matrix, but it's a nice add-in, I think, for this one. It gives a great visual indicator, basically, for what's happening. And that's pretty much it. So once you're ready, I would send this across to your staff as well as your customer, ask them to read it. What's nice about this one at the very end, if we just scroll down right to the end for you, there is an area where your customers can review, get back to you, but they can also sign it as well, as can your staff. So when you send this out to them, make sure you include everybody on there, ask them to review it, and then get back to you with any questions. That's it for this video. I appreciate it's not really an interesting one, and it drags on a little bit, but hopefully you've got enough value from that. If you do need any help, you can reach out to the guys at Ramsap. They're really, really helpful, and they can get back to you on email supports. But generally, you know, we get guidance for our risk assessments from a third party as well. So if you're part of the franchise network for linemark.com, you'll be supported through that as well. But for anyone else that's not part of our franchise, if you're just buying the 101 class, then of course you might need to get some third-party health and safety guidance as well. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next video.